Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our real estate committee here at the Queen's Chamber and our food and beverage committee for this awesome event. I would really like to thank Project Queens for sponsoring this event, as well as Fogo De Chao for having us here today. As far as the chamber goes, I would like you guys to save the date for June 7th. The chamber is doing our business expo at Citi Field. We're gonna have Doc Gooden there. We'll have a business lunch. And we'll have delegates from several countries attending. So thank you so much, and I'm going to pass it over to Michael Wang, the the chair of our real estate committee. Here you go, Michael.
Hey, thanks, Sharyar. So welcome to the Queen's Chamber of Commerce. I hope everyone can hear me. Thank you for joining. I'm Michael Wang. I'm the CEO of Project Queens. We're a full-service commercial leasing brokerage that specializes in Queens, for my Terra people that were just here. And I'm also the co-chair, as Sharyar mentioned, of the real estate committee for the Queen's Chamber of Commerce. Again, thank you to Fogo De Chao, who Desi is the manager here, and Eigner Chocolates for sponsoring and bringing chocolates. Thank you so much. Real quick about the chamber, out of all the not-for-profit groups that I'm a part of, or involved with, the Queen's Chamber of Commerce is by far the most active. It gives the most value in terms of making connections and going out to events and learning things at those events. They host hundreds of different events every year, and you can participate not only in the main chamber, but they have 13 or probably more now member committees. So today we're being hosted by the Real Estate Committee and the Food, Beverage, and Hospitality Committee. Thank you. So if you're not a member yet, I highly recommend checking it out and going to the website to see it. Our panel today is about let me say this right. Our panel today is about negotiating commercial leases with a focus on F&B operators. So where your business is located and the lease that you are going to negotiate and sign for it is one of the most important business decisions you're going to make for your business. And at that point, you will have not even opened the door for one day at your business. So, a lot of people may not really understand the impact of what they're signing for what could be the next 5, 10, 20 years of business at that location. So our panelists today, we comprise of different expertise. So we're going to share all our knowledge to you as much as we can. We hope you learn from it. So in this market, it has been very difficult to get deals done. Landlords and tenants are both scrutinizing all of the different lease clauses very carefully. Everyone's being very picky. So I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves and their expertise, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, folks. My name is Tom Farrell. I'm a business law attorney. I specialize in contracts and regulatory matters. I offer a combination of programs and practices that is designed to keep you out of the courtroom and away from the government agencies that regulate businesses. My practice is specifically targeted to the owners of small and medium-sized businesses on the theory that they're not getting enough information and are not getting enough help. And so that's what my practice does.
Hi, everyone. My name is Desi. I am the sales manager here at Fogo. And from this wonderful man, I think I'm the one that least know about this, but I can share the perspective as a client because we had to go through everything that Michael and the other two gentlemen are going to let us know. So I'm very excited to welcome you guys into my home.
Hi, my name is Michael Leone. I am the managing partner of ADS Engineers. We provide mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection engineering. We do a lot of restaurants and food and beverage and hospitality projects. Not only do we design the MEP systems, we also assist our clients or prospective clients in locating the proper spaces for them, or buildings for them from a utilities aspect, try to find the right fit for them to make their project somewhat seamlessly fit into any specific space.
All right, thank you. So it really does take a very collaborative effort between the owner and the tenant or the business to figure out a lease that makes sense for both parties. But particularly for the F&B operators and the new businesses, you have to know what you're looking for, and you need to know what to ask for in order to make that happen. So we're going to begin the panel. So thank you for the introductions. And we're going to start off with a question. So we're going to begin with the concrete and go into the business terms and the abstract later. So let's start with Michael Leone. As an engineer, what would you say is something that is very important for F&B operators when looking for space and negotiating a lease?
The things we look for in spaces that are important to food and beverage operators obviously are the utilities, as I mentioned, gas service, electric service, the plumbing service, and sewer services. Some of the biggest challenges we have in finding the right space is there enough gas service to the space or to the building? Same thing with the electric. Will the operator be required to go to the utility company themselves to bring in additional service or reinforce the service? Could be quite expensive. The other big challenge we have in locating proper spaces and helping negotiate leases is on the kitchen exhaust side and the makeup air side. There are very strict rules regarding kitchen exhaust, not only building code, but fire department code. And it can be very challenging finding the right space that can adapt for a commercial kitchen. So those are really the biggest challenges that we look to overcome before anybody signs a lease. We will advise our clients, this building is not really right for you, keep searching.
So a lot of time when people are looking for space for F&B, they want second-gen restaurant space. Is that correct? Based on what you're saying. But, you know, what I find is that if it's a really nice second-gen restaurant space setup, the landlord knows that, and they want to get value out of that. And once in a while, you can find something where you could just kind of slip into, and it's really nice. But there's so many cases, I would say more often than not, where the exhaust is not in the right place. It's not the exact gas service that you need, and a number of other things. So what are some of the things, in our audience, this is catered toward F&B operators. What are some of the things that make sense in terms of paying money or having the landlord adjust? And what are some things that are like maybe extra prohibitive where the space just doesn't make sense and you really need to go find a new one?
Well, as part of the negotiation could be to ask the landlord to bring the utilities that are required within the demise space. Lots of times, again, we'll do some preliminary calculations and ask the landlord, say, we need 600 amp service, we need whatever, 800,000 BTUs of gas, and we need a route for kitchen exhaust. Can you provide that within the demise space on their nickel, let's say? And we've done that, and to some success. Obviously, it's a negotiation, but if the landlord wants the tenant, that bad, then they'll make those provisions. I mean, there are a lot of buildings that want to attract restaurants, and you'll see it in new construction where the developer will ask us to include in our design a kitchen exhaust riser to the roof. This way they have the opportunity to attract a food and beverage tenant. Whether they use it or not, whether they get a different type of retail tenant, they always have that riser in place for a food and beverage tenant, whether it's this lease or the next lease or the next lease.
So, Thomas or Desi, do you want to chime in here? I know, Desi, for Fogo, I mean, this is, how big is this restaurant?
Wow, we can hold about 180 seats.
So it's 180 seats, and we talked earlier in preparation for this event that you have a charcoal grill. And this is an all-you-can-eat Brazilian steakhouse.
Correct.
So can you tell us a little bit about, what the condition of this building was before? Was it ready to go? Like, and if you could dive into it a little bit, like who paid for what, and things like that.
So most of those negotiations we cannot share just because of the company as well. But what I can share is most of the people that have been here before it was Fogo and come here right now, when they walk through the door, they have a wow factor. So before Fogo, this used to be a brew house. So they had the bar in the middle of the floor for you guys that are here that get to walk into the restaurant. They barely served food, so they did not have a kitchen. So when we first came in, we just drop everything down and start construction. As you mentioned, we have a charcoal grill, and it's the only one in Queens. All other restaurants have a gas grill. And that's where we hit a few bumps in the road. So the restaurant was supposed to open on July last year. And because of the charcoal grill laws that we were not very familiar, that we had to work with the other government orgs to bring it up to code. So we have to work with the fire department and the health environment department and the health department to bring all together and be able to put our charcoal grill working. So that was about 4 to 5 months that we hit a delay just to bring everything together. And it's one thing that we learn as a company, that moving forward before we go to other towns, just to get in touch with those government agencies to be sure that we have everything in place to not hit another 4 or 5 months delay. So it's something that we suffered, and I'm gladly to share. About the leasing contract, unfortunately, I cannot disclose much information, but I think it's always a base of negotiation, as the other two gentlemen mentioned. If you are not open, if you are not selling, I think it's worth it to sit down and talk about this before you sign your lease. What if I hit a bump? Can you help us with the rent? Would I be responsible to pay in the rent even though I'm closed for 6 months because I still need my fire inspection, I still need other kinds of inspections? So I think it's a great point of talk with your leasing agency and everybody else involved.
So, Thomas, I want to ask your opinion on this because you do leases and contracts all the time. There's the concept of landlord's work, and that's like base building work, what the landlord is supposed to provide to you as the business owner. And that's kind of things that are stuck into the building. Correct me if I'm wrong, like the exhaust, the HVAC, the utilities. And then the tenant traditionally is supposed to come in and do what we call the interior fit out, like everything within the walls. If you need to build the interior decor and the bar and things like that, the tenant's supposed to be responsible for that. But can you advise us a little bit on who's really responsible for what? And in terms of things like, it's so complicated with the construction tool that there's like FDNY sign off for the sprinklers. There's, if you're putting in new utilities, Con Edison has to come and do the meters and all of the above, even your DOB permitting. The concern for businesses all the time, especially small businesses, if they come in and are not prepared for an extra 3, 4, 5 months delay and you have to pay your rent, that can really crush a business. I think most businesses they fail because they don't have enough capital saved up to prepare for these things. So who's supposed to do what, and how do you negotiate? And how do you negotiate it?
Who's supposed to do what has actually changed significantly during the course of the past couple of years, because landlords are no longer entirely in the catbird seat the way they were before the pandemic. So there's a little more leeway. I think, Michael, you find that too, right? There's a little more leeway between what the landlord will demand and what the tenant actually has to submit to. As a rule of thumb, like Michael said, anything that is permanently affixed to the space and is going to stay there belongs to the landlord, and therefore the landlord has some responsibility in terms of maintenance. However, landlords' primary responsibilities are to what are called the structural portions of the building: the roof, the exterior walls, the boiler, sometimes ovens and other systems like that. But generally speaking, whatever is within the four walls of your premises, you as the tenant are responsible for maintaining. Now, as I said, if you get a if you get a lawyer or an accountant or an experienced broker involved in the negotiations right from the outset, it's easier to get some concessions in that area. It also helps, like I said, there's a lot more empty space in New York City than there was 5 years ago. So landlords are no longer entirely in the catbird seat. There's a lot more room for negotiation now. Have I got another minute?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
You got like 30 minutes.
Don't tell a lawyer that. That's a bad. I wanted to bring up something that Michael and I were talking about before we started, because Michael does something in his practice that I do in my practice in a different area. It's the idea of getting the regulators involved in your design and planning right from the get-go. Michael works with the fire department very closely, whenever his clients permit him, to get the fire department involved and exposed to what they're planning to install, right? I do that in a similar way when I'm dealing with an industry or a business that involves hazardous chemicals, dangerous machines, et cetera, et cetera. I will ask my client to go to the Department of Labor and have them send an inspector before they open for business, because it does two things. It highlights potential trouble spots, and it establishes with those agencies your bona fides, your intention to do business the way it should be done, your intention to do business in a way that doesn't put your employees or customers at risk. Michael does it, and I do it, and I strongly suggest that if you're building out to any significant extent, or if you have a business or an industry, like the food and beverage industry, where there's a potential for physical harm, get to the regulatory authorities right from the beginning. It can save you some trouble down the road.
Can I add to the fire department? Most of the fire department inspectors are all former firefighters. Although they're very intelligent, they know a lot about HVAC systems and smoke control and things like that. They're not engineers. So they interpret things the way they want to interpret things from a firefighting perspective. The best thing you can do, as Tom mentioned, is involve them in your project as early as possible. Tell them this is what we plan on doing. Submit your char broilers or coal ovens or wood burning ovens. Submit the plans to them before anything is fabricated or built, and just involve them in the whole process and say, this is what we plan on doing. You like it? You okay with this? Will you sign off on this? Get their feedback, and it will make the process that much seamless. And at the end of the day, you're not going to be held up for 4 months. You may be held up somewhat, but not for 4 months.
So in my transactional experience, by the way, I'm a leasing broker, so I represent businesses and we negotiate leases a lot. What I'm hearing is in preparation of getting into the lease, there's things you can do to prepare. One, to make sure that this space even works. But after you sign the lease, generally speaking, you're going to be on the clock in the amount of free rent that you have. And once that free rent period's over and whatever the lease says, the owner's going to want their money. So you can get an expediter for like DOB sign-offs. You can get your architect and contractor in before you sign the lease to make sure your plans and everything are going to work. I was thinking of something else before, but there's a number of things that you can do to get ready. we'll recap it. I'll put in the notes in the live link. But there's a couple of other things that you can prepare, like your architect can get involved to make plans. So we're talking about a lot heavily about construction and build out. We have not talked about any lease terms like rent or escalation, things like that. So before we jump off of the construction, I just want to ask Michael your opinion. If I listed out a bunch of different construction items, which ones are the most difficult to do? Like, which ones should operators kind of run away from in terms of trying to build it out new, and which ones are, reasonably achievable? So in terms of like, if there's no exhaust system in the building, is that something that people should try to tackle? I've been into the spaces with no HVAC or heating and cooling ready. What if there's no grease trap in the place? And what if the utilities, like the gas, usually the electric and water are in there, but what if the gas is, maybe in the building, you're not pulling it from the street, but it's in the cellar and it's not into the space. And landlord requires the tenant to go and after they pull it in, get Con Edison to go in and get a new meter. Like which one of these items, or are all of them just something that people don't want to deal with?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is kitchen exhaust and the makeup air for the exhaust. Makeup air is something that's typically neglected in most restaurants. What gets exhausted needs to come in also to the building, otherwise it won't exhaust. That's when you start getting smoke roll out and things like that rolling out of your hoods. So those are the biggest challenges, and the reason those are the biggest challenges is because there are such strict code requirements for exhaust discharge termination locations. You don't have a lot of choices. You cannot be on a lot line. You can't be even 10 feet from a lot line. And just getting the amount of air into these spaces is challenging. Gas is another challenge because there's very strict, with all the gas explosions we've had in recent years, the building department has really cracked down on gas. So you shouldn't, you want to try to avoid having to run gas from their service room to your space. They won't permit gas in public corridors and things like that. That could be very challenging too. That's why I said earlier, what you want to negotiate in the lease is ask the landlord, bring your utilities to the demised tenant space. This way, that's their problem, not your problem.
Okay, understood. So, sorry, are we using the mic?
Yeah, let's use the mic.
Okay, so plug it in and we can use it. So, we'll just let them do that for a second. So I'll just hold this here. All right. Quick question while we're doing this. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Mike, just a quick question. So there's a Korean barbecue pop-up restaurant on Old Country Road by 70 in Nassau.
Okay.
So they
Let's
were
just say.
open for a while. They served Korean barbecue. And then 2 weeks later, when I went back, they were shut down by the fire department because apparently the exhaust did not meet the requirements. How is it possible? Like, they were allowed to open the business, and while they were open, the fire department told them it's no good. It doesn't make any sense.
This was Nassau County?
Yes.
So, chances are that could have even been a volunteer fire department. It's not a city agency. I don't know too much about the relationship between the building department and the local fire departments out there. There are fire marshals. I would have to believe somebody talked to the fire marshal about what they were planning on doing. They could have been shut down for a number of reasons. Kitchen exhaust ties into a lot of different things, okay? Kitchen hoods have ancel systems, fire protection. It's a chemical sprinkler system, let's say. So you have an ancel system in the hood that ties into the exhaust system. It also ties into a gas solenoid valve. Fire department could have come in just on a routine inspection and saw something was lacking. And again, like I said, you're dealing with firefighters. It's all about life safety. They're not interested in building code and this and that. It's about life safety. So I'm guessing that's what happened. They must have come in on a routine inspection and saw something they felt was life-threatening.
Okay, so we'll just continue for now.
Well, I have to warn you, if somebody else hands me another microphone, I'm going to start singing.
Oh, the other mic is.
This working? Nope. Testing? Oh, wait. No, I don't think so.
It's okay. We could just kind of keep going until it works. So my next question was going to be for Desi, but we could ask Thomas as well. So moving from the construction, the other points in the lease that are very important are the actual lease terms. So base rent, escalations, lease length, all these kind of things. There's a bunch of very important items in there that can make or break your business. So what, Thomas, do you think are the important items to look at, and which ones have been like more difficult to negotiate?
One of the more important aspects of a lease is something that frequently takes tenants by surprise, and it's because it's not base rent or escalation rent, it's insurance. Insurance is frequently a big nut when it comes to a commercial lease, because the landlord is going to be very specific about the types and amounts of insurance that you are required to have. And if you don't provide evidence that you have the insurance that's required by the lease, that's a breach, and the landlord can terminate your leasehold. So insurance is expensive in and of itself, and then some landlords, don't get mad, Mike, some landlords require you to have a whole list of additional named insureds, some of which are reasonable and some of which are not, and all of which can cost you more money than a regular insurance policy. So pay close attention to the the insurance provisions in your lease. What I tell my clients to do is copy that section right away and run it down to their broker, so the broker could start looking for the policies that are required and get an idea of how much it's going to cost.
Okay, so let's talk about the money, because the money is the most important. There's the base rent, right, which everyone knows that's what you have to pay every month. And then your escalations, I think most people know the landlord wants 3% every year. I think that's what I see in most of my leases. Sometimes it's 2% if it's a bigger lease. Sometimes you can get away with something like 10% every 5 years. And for a lot of business owners, they're not looking past the first 3 years, but if you run that escalation now into year 7, 8, 9, if you have a renewal option into year 15, that becomes a huge number on the escalation. So when you go, and maybe Fogo does this, when you work with larger businesses with many locations and they're taking a lot of square footage, they scrutinize the escalations to like every 0.25%. So make sure you're looking into the future on that. But very, very importantly, what I see as a big, I guess mistake is the word, for tenants who are not looking out for this stuff, is what we call the additional rent. So the additional rent is the maintenance, the taxes, the insurance that was just mentioned, and a lot of the time they'll go like on a price per square foot basis. So if you have a CAM charge of a location like this with a parking lot, it could be $3 a foot, it could be $5 a foot. Sometimes you go into a shopping center, it's like $20 a foot, tax and CAM added up. So if you take that into a 1,000 square foot lease or 2,000 square foot lease, that could be a lot of money. I don't know off the top of my head, but you just 20 times like 2,000 divided by 12 every month, that starts to eat into your operating expenses. So in terms of CAM, tax, insurance, what do people do? I'm not even sure the answer to this, because when you go into the lease, the landlord's like, here's the cam.
Yeah.
You got to pay this percentage of the tax or the full tax. And like you said, you say you have to pay this, get this insurance. Can we review it? Like, how do we know it's actually $5? Are they making money off of this stuff?
Well, you could review and analyze some of it because the real estate taxes are a matter of public record, and your percentage of the building is easily calculable. So if as a tenant you're responsible for paying 20% of the real estate taxes because you occupied 20% of the building, you can get tax records, or you can ask the landlord to provide, even if just from the previous year, so you have a ballpark figure of what's coming up. Okay. If common area maintenance charges include maintenance fees for the parking lot, not ventilation, extermination costs, security, things like that. Again, if you ask the landlord for a history of what's gone before, evidence of what the bills have been in the past, sometimes you can even get that from the tenant that's leaving or your neighboring tenants. You can find out some information about what comprises the common area maintenance, and you can also find out then what's negotiable. Because if you're allowed to provide your own, say, extermination services, and it's cheaper than what the landlord is charging, you can save some money that way. So some of the different elements in the common area maintenance are negotiable and discoverable, so to speak.
So this stuff is really, it's a lot. It's not one piece of it is complicated, but adding up everything together, it actually is fairly complicated. I must just really, this is my honest opinion, you need a really good broker to help you navigate all this stuff. And a good attorney to kind of put the lease together. So Desi, like when Fogo is looking for a new location, aside from the construction, what's important? What are some of the important aspects of the location, of the price, of the terms? Like what do you need in place to make a deal happen and actually select the location?
All right, so first it has to be a location with a good traffic. So in the last 2-3 years, Fogo has been building locations next to malls. So for example, here at the Queens location, we are right across the Queens Center Mall. Our closest location to here would be in Garden City, which is right across the Roosevelt Field Mall. And then we have a third location in the island as well, in Huntington Station, which is in the Walt Whitman Mall. So this will attract definitely the foot traffic to your restaurant. Center of towns, they're growing, and there lately have been many investments to it, as Queens is. It's been growing for the last 3-4 years, so it's been on our radar for a little bit of while, and then finally we found this great spot here, and because it was just right off COVID, I think the brew closed in 2019, we were able to discuss and get a better lease that worked for Fogo. Fogo also has some sort of the same pricing as a Cheesecake Factory. So if we know a Cheesecake Factory, it's making profit on the region, then we know we'll probably thrive as well. So that's another thing that we look for it. Normally, we do a research within 10 miles from the restaurant to see who are the people that live around, what are the household, combined salaries and stuff like that, to see if it is our public. Here with Queens, we did only a 3-mile radius, and we were able to get everything that we look for as a company. We got millennials, we got a large diversity in population, most of the people, they're willing to try different foods. So those are the stuff that we look for, and that's why we were so attracted here to Queens.
So it's like you're looking at sales data from competitors in the area.
Correct.
Or other business in the area. You're looking at demographics and like median household income. Foot traffic and auto traffic, do you look at that kind of stuff?
So here in Queens, we definitely took the advantage of the foot traffic, but having the 2 subway lines very close, having the mall, having the other 2 restaurants. On places that are more car like traffic, we would look at that, which is the case of the Walt Whitman Mall, which is the case of the one in Carl Place as well. So here in Queens definitely was a big check on the checklist the fact that we have so many people walking by daily to come and go for work.
What about parking and transportation, or however, how do people get into the space and parking?
Of course, of course. So we looked at, especially in Queens, we looked for a leasing place that had a parking lot available. Over here at this location, we have about 70 spots for cars, and that was a huge plus. At the beginning, I did not understand much. I thought maybe because we have so many subway lines here, people would not be prone to drive. But then that was a big, everyone that calls to make a reservation, they are always asking. So it's something that Fogo looks to. They looks for building spaces where you have parking lots, or at least where you have a park garage next to you, and we try partnership with those, which is the case of our Manhattan location. We don't have a parking lot available there, but across the street, there's a parking lot company that we partner up where we bring the value down, or even free for our guests, we'll take the cost into it. Which here in Queens, besides of having the parking lot, at night we do offer valet complimentary for our guests as well. So it's another cost that we end up paying for just because we saw that the search for it was so big.
So I guess at the end of the day, how does someone figure out if a space makes sense cost-wise? There's all of the terms that we just discussed, but then there's the construction. And in my experience, if you're next to a subway line with a lot of foot traffic, you're gonna have to pay for it. If you have 1 or 2 parking spots, maybe the owner just kind of throws it in. But if you have a parking lot like here with 70 spaces, you're gonna have to pay for it. If not like per parking spot or per dollar per square footage of the lot, it's like baked in there somewhere. So, what I find is when opening a particular F&B, you really need to know where your customer's coming from, and you need to find a space that kind of accommodates that, and not get into a space that has all this extra stuff that you don't need, because one way or another, you're kind of just paying for it. So I guess, I could just, whoever wants to answer, like, how, at the end of the day, like, what's the calculation? Is it like upfront costs? Is it the monthly cost? Like, how do we help some of the Queens Chamber constituency and everyone that wants to open a small business pick the correct location, and not, because I see this all the time, they open and then 3 to 6 months later, 8 months later, when now adding all their labor costs and inventory costs and everything, they're like, holy crap, I didn't know it's gonna be like this much money.
So on a marketing point of view, I would say once you decide you want to open a restaurant, a little bakery, or any sort of business, you got to have a business plan. You got to think of your idea. What I want this to be. How do I want to treat my guests? Am I just going to be a takeout place, which is probably going to cost you less because you don't have servers, you don't have bartenders? Or am I going to be a full-size restaurant? If I'm going to be a full-size restaurant, what is the range of the meals that I'm going to offer? Am I going to offer like a $20 option dinner, or I'm going to offer a $70 option dinner? What kind of clients do you want to attract? And I feel like after that, you got to see if you are really willing to take that risk of your business plan. Can I afford this? Do I think like 90% of my bills can be paid by itself, and in the beginning I'll just have to put 10% of my own money in? So I think on the marketing side, on the client side, as a Fogo side, this is what you have to say if it is worth it. And once you have that down, then of course, got to get in contact to a lawyer, got to get in contact with an engineer, and see what else costs will be added to that to be successful. Sometimes you have the strength and the wanting and the needing to open a new business, but you're actually naive and you have no idea all the things that go through. And then it's surprise after surprise. And like you mentioned, after 6-8 months, you won't be able to hold your own legs and have that building, that company still growing.
One thing that I suggest to Mike clients, Michael, is that they look for complementary businesses. Look for businesses that's going to attract the same kind of clientele and foot traffic that you want. To make sure that your operation fits in the same demographic, in the same neighborhood, the same block if you can get it. Other restaurants are not necessarily your competitors, but they're helping you because they're attracting people to an area, to a neighborhood. Bakeries and diners and restaurants don't exist in a vacuum. So if you have a choice, if you've narrowed down your selection to 2 choices, look for the one that has businesses that are complementary to yours. Now, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
You have to make decisions like this and help customers make decisions like this all the time. What is the one piece of information that you need from them that they don't give you unless you ask for it?
They don't give me a lot of information. And we make sure that we ask for a bunch of it. So I'll answer your question, just kind of one out of the many things. Okay. And I'll be very honest. So I'm a commercial leasing broker. My clients are businesses and owners. When I see a business owner and we're asking them questions, what's your budget? Where do you want to be? What kind of food do you sell? All this kind of stuff. We ask how many locations that they have. And when they say they don't have any locations and it's a new business, I'm very hesitant to work with them because it's, in terms of my job, it's kind of like an educational process where they're kind of figuring out all this different stuff. But it's, why I have that feeling is because all of these numerous things that we run into, even with larger, more experienced businesses, the stuff like the permitting and scrutinizing lease clauses, and Fogo's coming to Queens, I thought the trains were gonna bring enough traffic. They don't even get it right a lot of the time, but they have like a big capital stack to weather some storm, and they have operations and a bunch of people that could fix things. So, I ask if you have other locations open. And, I think it's very important because it's such a big risk. Everyone's so intelligent, even if they're opening their first business, they're so intelligent because they want to even pursue this endeavor. Like the Queen's Chamber has tons of resources to prepare and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So do any of the panelists have something that you think is important to share that people should know that I don't know, that I don't know about?
My last one, I promise. As Thomas says, the restaurants around, they are not your enemy. We, as a Fogo policy, every time we're coming to your place, we bring all the managers to all the restaurants and business around to make friends with them. We're not here to scare you. We're not here to take your clients. But, Monday they are feeling pasta. They will go to a pasta place. But maybe Tuesday, because the server at the pasta place said we have an amazing steakhouse, they might come to us. And the same thing around. Today, we might be running short of sugar and we don't have the delivery. But if we have a good relationship with the restaurant next to us, we can ask for one bag to make it through the day and return the next day. So we work on friendship base. And thank God here in the Queens location, we had the other 2 restaurants next to us to spend their holiday parties with us. And when we have holidays happening at Fogo, of course, on Mother's Day, you want to be with your family, but when you are a server, when you are a bartender, you have to stay here. So we cater from the restaurant next to us to give something extra for our workers as well. So I think it's that hospitality point. So if you are in this business, you have to have that hospitality into your blood. And just take everyone as a friend and not actually as an enemy.
I have something to share. There's been a couple of new recent laws that went into effect that were adopted by the building department, both of which do affect the food and beverage industry. The most important one, probably the biggest impact right now, is New York City Local Law 38. I don't know if anybody's familiar with it, but Local Law 38 is basically a pollution control law that's been adopted. And what that law requires now is that all charbroilers, coal grills, wood-burning ovens, coal-fired ovens, all need to have a pollution control unit on the exhaust system to eliminate the odors, smoke, grease, etc. That is a very expensive piece of equipment. There's various ways you can do it. It's extremely expensive to install, your first cost, and it's very expensive to maintain. Like I said, there's various ways you could do it. Electrostatic precipitators with carbon. They have washdown cycles, has to be tied into the grease trap. It makes your grease trap bigger. And then they have filtration units with odor control sections also. It's not as expensive, but maintaining the filters, you have to maintain those filters more often than an electrostatic precipitator. These are costs that a lot of people are not aware of that need to be factored into your budget planning, et cetera. The other law that's going to start to affect food and beverage is Local Law 97, which is decarbonizing New York City. Starting 2024, all new buildings and major renovations must be all electric, no fossil fuels. So if you're looking to put a restaurant in a new building construction or a major renovation project, you're not going to find gas in the building. Now, restaurants are going to be forced to do all electric cooking, which could be significant to your products, etc. So those are a couple of new recent developments that will affect the food and beverage industry.
So how much is the pollution control unit for like a 2,000 square foot restaurant? How much does it take to maintain?
It's hard to say. Again, depending on the size of the hood, by a small restaurant, you're probably talking, I'm going to say maybe $50,000 for the smallest electrostatic precipitator or filtration unit. And the maintenance, I really couldn't tell you, but you know, you're maintaining these things probably every 3 months, if not. Maybe Desi knows how often they maintain theirs. But it's significant. It is significant.
All right, so it's a bit scary. That was the reason why we got pulled off for 4 or 5 months. The cost of the unit for us yearly is $100,000. Installation, maintenance, having all the products that need to go in. So that was a big cost that we did not account for this location, and it definitely makes a difference. It's 100 to 200,000, something like that. I heard in 2 conversations.
Okay. And how much is the maintenance? Like, you have a yearly maintenance for this?
Yes, they did an evaluation about yearly, so I don't know how much would it be every maintenance. I know we have hood cleanings every 2 weeks, and that's not even accounted to that. So on top of that, we still have to have people come and wash and clean our hoodies every 2 weeks, and it's on top of that 100 to 100,000 yearly.
Oh, yearly, but this is
Yeah.
a lot of money. So there's like a million different things we could keep talking about and getting into detail, like options and are they fair market value, which are incredibly important. The guarantees and security deposit, I'm sure a lot of people are very interested in. But if you want to discuss more, if you want to network and do business after, but particularly for the F&B operators, if you need to dig into any of these more, contact the Queen's Chamber. If you have specific questions, contact a professional that you know, that's trusted, that you trust. And you know, any one of these topics we could talk, or at least I'm sure me and Thomas could talk about it for like 8 hours each, like every clause. So that's it. Thank you very much for everyone for coming.